All right, welcome everyone. So glad to have you here today for May's Go NAPSACC Consultant Training. My name is Aviva Starr. I am one of two implementation advisors for Go NAPSACC. I'm going to lead today's training with support from Emmy Clark.
Hey, Aviva.
Yeah.
You're sharing the wrong version of your screen. You're sharing the slide and notes at the same time.
Interesting. Not how it looks on my side. Thanks. Let me try again.
You weren't originally, and then when you reshared, you were.
Sorry, everyone. I am going to do two things then. All right, try number two. Welcome, everyone. Today's training is for Go NAPSACC consultants. For those of you who are either new to Go NAPSACC, welcome. We invite you to join NAPSACC Nation. For those of you who have been trained before, we appreciate you coming back. We know that there's so much you learn in the beginning. Sometimes it's nice to be here for a refresher. If you haven't yet, please introduce yourself in the chat. We'd love to know your name, the state you're from, anything else you want to share about the work you'll be doing with Go NAPSACC. And if you have questions as we go along, please put those in the chat and Emmy will be happy to help you. And so with that, I'm going to turn off my video. Thanks all for being here and we're going to get started. So just a little bit about our agenda for today. Today, we're going to certainly talk about the learning objectives, talk some about setting the foundations for healthy habits and why Go NAPSACC does its work and the way it does. Certainly an introduction to Go NAPSACC, our purpose and the 5-step improvement process. And then most of the time today is going to be spent with me showing you the provider account and what the experience is like for a childcare provider who's using Go NAPSACC. And then you will leave with an assignment. So I will explain that assignment and give you some tips to get you started. Today is part one of the consultant training, but it's part one provider tools. So today we're really focused on the experience of the childcare provider doing Go NAPSACC, so you can best understand what they're doing and you can support them in their work. When we come back in 2 weeks, that will be focusing on the consultant tools. That's when you'll see your consultant account and learn more about your work to help providers through their process. So our learning objectives. After today's session, you'll be able to describe how children's eating and physical activity influence their overall development. Identify everyday opportunities in childcare to support healthy habits and development. Explain the purpose of Go NAPSACC. Describe how Go NAPSACC's 5-step improvement process helps reach best practices. And lastly, you'll have the foundations for successfully navigating the provider tools. That will really become more real for you once you do that assignment and get the chance to play around in the website and see what that's like. So starting off, we want to talk about setting the foundation for healthy habits. So certainly, as people who are involved in early childhood technical assistance, you work every day to help ensure that children are cared for in environments that help them thrive and build a strong foundation for future success. Children's development in each of these domains is important for their overall well-being. Certainly, Go NAPSACC focuses, and you're probably thinking as you come here today about health and physical development, but we also know how important cognitive development is, language development, social emotional development, and sensory development. We also know more and more about how these are all intertwined and they support each other. So as we think about them, we want to think a little bit about why are we doing the work we're doing. So as I mentioned, certainly Go NAPSACC is focused on the health and physical development of children. As I said, knowing that these are interconnected. So knowing that we're working for the health of children, their long-term physical development, and we know that we're talking about working in childcare, I'm curious to know why you think childcare is an important environment to focus this work. So any thoughts, you're welcome to add those to the chat or unmute yourself. Tell me a little bit about why you think childcare programs play such an important role in shaping children's health. Great. So yeah, children spend a lot of time in childcare, right? After they're home, it's probably the next time they spend the most time. It's their home away from home, as people say. So it's an important place because it's where they are a long time. Great, thanks, Tammy. It's a way of connecting to their families and their community. Their childcare is a touch point for families. A lot of families look to their childcare providers for education and guidance. Right, they're their first interactions outside of their family. They're one of the next most important adults in their lives. It's also a place where they exposure to peers. And yes, great, thanks, Anna. It's a place where they can also have exposure to healthy habits. The reality is children are learning everywhere they are, right? They're learning habits. It's when we form habits, is when we're youngest. It's when it's easiest to form good habits. It's also the easiest to form bad habits that we then may want to change later. So childcare is an important place. Pre-pandemic, the statistics were that over 60% of children in the United States were in childcare full time, which is considered 30 hours a week or more. And we know that most young children who are in childcare are probably there closer to 40 or 50 hours a week. We also know that they're eating lots of their meals and snacks at childcare, right? If we have breakfast and lunch in our childcare program 5 days a week, that's already 10 out of 21 meals a week. So certainly a lot of their nutrition today is being provided to them as childcare, as well as you all mentioned, their exposure to others, their development of healthy habits, their way of seeing, of approaching foods, new foods, and being physically active is happening at childcare. For many children, this is where they are the most physically active. It's the time that they have outdoors, especially in the winter when it's getting dark early, but even for most toddlers, right? They're going to bed at 7 o'clock if you're getting home from work at 6 o'clock. Really, childcare is the place where they have the time to be outdoors, to be physically active. And then, as many of you mentioned, that is where they're being exposed to other adults, their peers, who are also adding how they see the world and how they interact in the world. So we know that childcare is an important place to lay the groundwork for healthy living. So with that in mind, here we have these children sitting down eating together. I'd be curious to know, we see them eating nutritious foods, right? We can see the vegetables on their plate and so forth. What else? What other areas of their development are being affected in this picture? So if people have thoughts in the chat, or again, to unmute yourself, what other areas of development? Tiffany mentioned motor development. So certainly fine motor skills. I love in this picture that these children are actually learning to use a fork and a knife. Language development. Yes, hopefully they're having lots of conversation. Cognitive development as they talk about foods, talk about their lives. Peer-to-peer communication, that's certainly part of that language development. Social development, right? They're learning about each other's likes and dislikes. They're interacting. They're learning some manners, social skills. That's all part of our social emotional development. And then great, Julie mentioned their sensory development. So as they taste and smell new foods, new textures, that's all part of their sensory development. So in this one mealtime, so much is happening that influences their overall development. I think often mealtime is considered as something you just have to do to get through the day because everyone needs to eat. But the reality is it can be a part of their learning, and it is a part of their learning. And the more enriching we make that environment, the more beneficial it is in so many ways. So one more picture. Here we've got two children playing outside. They're certainly using their physical body, their gross motor skills. What other areas of development do you see being influenced? And tell me a little bit about why you think this area of development is being impacted through this experience. Right, so we've got those gross motor skills. We see that. It's part of our physical development. Thanks, Andrea. Great, so Tamiko mentioned communication. So hopefully they're certainly having social interaction here, hopefully some language skills, probably some problem solving skills, as Anna mentioned, right? At some point, this game may go from fun to not as fun, and they have to do problem solving. That's an important part of their social emotional development. Approaches to play and learning, great. So that's part of sensory development, social emotional development, so many things. I think about cause and effect, right? As they bump into each other and see how that works. That's all part of cognitive development. So here they are, they're outside playing, and they're also learning. So we need to keep that in mind, that all of our activities are part of our learning, part of our overall development. Hopefully those are concepts that you all are familiar with. If not, we're happy to talk to you more about how all of these areas of development are interrelated. But we also think they're important for childcare providers to hear that message from you. So many childcare providers are getting pressure to prepare children for school. And sometimes that feels like you shouldn't take the time to have an enjoyable meal or to be outside and engage in the environment. But we know in all of these different places, children are still learning, and they're learning the important skills they need to get ready for school, get ready for life, to develop healthy habits for their lifetime. So let's start talking about Go NAPSACC. The purpose of Go NAPSACC is to support improvements to childcare environments that foster healthy eating, physical activity, and the overall development in children. It was developed here at UNC Chapel Hill, started in the early 2000s. It was developed by researchers, public health professionals, and childcare professionals. We always want to bring together the experts on what was out there in best practices with the people like you, the consultants, and childcare providers to say, this is what's really feasible in a childcare program. So we have the best practices, but hopefully developed in a way that's realistic to implement and feasible for childcare providers to put into place. It has been proven effective in making healthy changes. It's been evaluated several times. I'll tell you a little bit more about that in just a minute. Go NAPSACC is widely used and trusted in more than 20 states. I think we're up to 23 states now. And so we are thrilled to have you be part of NAPSACC Nation. And Go NAPSACC is free with unlimited use in states with a Go NAPSACC contract. So if you're here today, that's because your state is contracted to use Go NAPSACC. And that means as many consultants and childcare providers in your state that want to be involved, we are welcome to join. So know that there's no limit. You can do your outreach as widely as you want, as long as it fits in with your own state's implementation model. So that's probably the other thing to know is every state uses Go NAPSACC a little bit differently. And so you certainly want to know the intent and purposes in your state. So I mentioned a little bit about the research. Go NAPSACC has been shown to be effective. It's been in over 10 studies across 7 states. It's been shown to improve childcare provider practices, children's behaviors, and children's weight. It has, in 2019, Go NAPSACC was recognized as having the best evidence for impact among obesity prevention interventions designed for children under 5. So you know that you are using something that is evidence-based that can make a difference. So we're thrilled to have you here. You will get to know this infographic well, this graphic well over your time with Go NAPSACC. It's how we kind of see our work in Go NAPSACC with this best practices core surrounded by our 5-step improvement process. So looking at that core, the Go NAPSACC program is based upon a set of best practices. These best practices were developed through a rigorous process that used the latest scientific research and the most recent guidelines and recommendations for the field. They represent our best available knowledge about how childcare providers can support the development of healthy behaviors in children. Having these best practices at the heart of the program ensures that childcare programs are always moving in the right direction, regardless of what they choose to work on. And the best practices are grouped into modules or contact areas, each with their own color and icon. So starting here, we've got child nutrition with our green apple, breastfeeding and infant feeding, farm to EC, and oral health. That's kind of the nutrition side of Go NAPSACC. On the other side, when we think about physical activity, we've got infant and child physical activity, outdoor play and learning, and the reduction of screen time. Once you get into Go NAPSACC, you'll really be able to see all of those best practices, but I want to give you a little bit of taste of them today. So starting with child nutrition is broken into 6 subsections. You see them here on the left: food and beverages provided, feeding environment, feeding practices, menus and variety, education and professional development, which is in each of the Go NAPSACC modules and relates to the education of children, families, and staff, as well as policies in all modules, because we know that we want to take the changes childcare programs have made and write them into policy so that they're permanent. Let me give you a couple examples of best practices. So when we think about food and beverages provided, one example is that fruit, not juice, is offered 2 times per day or more. A feeding environment example is that television videos are never on during meal and snack times. A feeding practices example is that teachers always praise children for trying new or less preferred foods. And lastly, in menus and variety, weekly menus always include a variety of healthy foods. So that gives you an idea of some of the best practices, the goals that we're going to be assisting childcare providers in meeting and fully implementing in their childcare program. And now for some examples in physical activity. The physical activity module is broken into 5 subsections. Time provided. Preschool children are provided 120 minutes or more for indoor and outdoor physical activity each day. Indoor play environment. A large variety of portable play equipment is available and in good condition for children to use indoors. And for teacher practices, we want to make sure that teachers incorporate physical activity into classroom routines, transitions, and planned activities. I think that one's important to see with that first one. 120 minutes sounds pretty overwhelming when you think about physical activity, but this isn't all in one block, right? This is broken up. This means in circle time, you could do a dance activity. This means while you're waiting in line to go outside, you could be playing Simon Says, right? That there's all of those kinds of uses of physical activity throughout the day to help get to that 120 minutes. And then again, in physical activity, we have a section on education and professional development, and then policy. So we will certainly be talking about how this looks for the provider as we move through and I show you the website, but I'm going to take a moment here and to see if anyone has any questions about what they've learned about Go NAPSACC so far. So certainly put those in the chat as you go. The next step of Go NAPSACC surrounding those best practices is that 5-step improvement process, which you see here on the screen. And that's the process that many of us use whenever we're going through change, but it's put in an organized way to help you as their consultant, lead them through this process, and for the childcare provider to see exactly where they are in the process. So step 1 is they need to assess where they are currently. So in any of those 7 modules that I mentioned before, they can take a self-assessment to get themselves started. And so that's where they'd answer questions about where they currently are in meeting those best practices. Once they've taken that self-assessment, they review the results, hopefully with you, having conversations with them about what they learned. And then they start action planning. So they choose a few goals to work on. They create action plans that really detail what's going to help make this reality in their program. From there, they start to take action. They can do that in many ways, obviously working with the people in their program, working with their families, learning more through our tips and materials library that I'll show you in a minute, but lots of ways to get started. Step 4 is learn more. Go NAPSACC has built into it trainings for each of those subsections. So as I showed you in child nutrition, there's a food provided suggestion, there's a feeding practices section. Each of those sections has its own half-an-hour training in Go NAPSACC, so I can show those to you soon as a way to learn more. And certainly all of you as consultants hopefully are connected to what other trainings are available in their community to help them get started. Once they've done that and they've taken their action plans, they've learned what they need to know, they've put them into action so that they are now reality in their program, they come to step 5. Step 5 we call keep it up. There are kind of a few pieces to their step. The most important is that they retake that initial self-assessment. So they retake it so that they can see the progress they've made. And to be honest, so people like you and funders and state level people can see the changes that are happening throughout your state. We also hope Keep It Up as a time to celebrate their work and a time, as I mentioned before, to put it into policy to make their changes permanent for the long term. So with that, I'm going to show you a brief video about Go NAPSACC and its work in action. And if anyone, Emmy, if you can let me know if you can see and hear this video, and here we go.
Early childhood is very important. That's when their minds are open to everything, and we can mold that child and educate that child through health practices, because you need to have a healthy body in order to have a healthy mind.
The Go NAPSACC program is a suite of online tools that helps child care providers improve the nutrition and physical activity environments for the programs and the children and the families that they care for. The Go NAPSACC program has 5 steps: assessment, planning, taking action, learning more, and keeping it up. The Go NAPSACC tools help providers walk through each step of the process and help them identify areas that they want for change and how to make those changes.
Go NAPSACC was an awesome program with awesome resources and tools to be able to help you modify things, set goals, work with your teachers, work with your parents.
The online tools that really helped me the most was when I sat down and did the assessment, and they printed out the things that the goals that I have met, and then the goals that I needed to meet.
The action plan has really been beneficial to help providers to stay on track with what they're doing. It's really helpful to have that plan that they can follow step by step.
In many cases, there are TA providers available who help child care programs improve what they do in a lot of areas.
Terry come out here and had a hoop day with us, and it's amazing how many different things you can do with those hula hoops.
To me, I feel that's one of the most important things, is to show them, model how they can do it and what they can do, and empower them to be able to do that on their own.
But the Go NAPSACC program is also designed to be used independently by the child care provider and can provide them the support that they need in making important changes.
At least when they're here at the center, if they out with their gross motor skills, running, jumping, skipping, paddling a bicycle, kicking a ball, Go NAPSACC, it helped me to make sure that my children are getting the gross motor skills that they are needed.
So it has made a major impact on the way that we eat, the way that we serve, and the way that they feel.
Every child care program wants only the best for the children and families in their care. The NAPSACC program can help them meet that goal.
It's just been a really positive program that I think is bringing positive results to not just our kids, but our staff and their parents.
I just love NAPSACC, and I enjoyed the journey. And my teachers did too, and the children.
So I'd be curious to know if anything kind of stood out to people from that video, anything they thought of as they thought of the childcare provider going through those steps, or for themselves as a consultant, anything that maybe stood out for them that they thought would be helpful or looked complicated, just any feedback. I love the comment in the end about it not just having impact on the children, but on the staff and families as well, that it really brought everyone together to think differently about their habits. When we come back together in 2 weeks, and look at the consultant tools, you're going to see all kinds of recruitment flyers and other materials that we have to help you in your work. And a link to that video is on one of the flyers. So hopefully you'll find that helpful to share with other people as you move through. I'm going to start now showing you the Go NAPSACC website, which you should be able to see on your screen. As you see, I've logged into, we have a demo website, a pretend website, where I can make a pretend childcare provider account, which is going to be part of your assignment. So everything we're doing today is just a chance to see you what it looks like for the provider. So when you first log on, you'll see on the left this green navigation bar that kind of, we're going to walk our way through each step of the account. So the first thing the provider sees is their My NAPSACC page. And here on the left, you see those 7 modules that we just talked about. And I get to see exactly where am I as a child care in my process. So I get to see here, I have taken one Go NAPSACC self-assessment. I took it in October 2020. So it's been a while since I've been here. And I can see here I am, I'm right at the edge of leading the way. So we kind of break up the self-assessments in 3 categories: room for improvement, making progress, and leading the way. We hope to be encouraging, but yet honest about where people are as they go. I can see quickly I haven't taken any other self-assessments yet, but that's okay. This is where I'm going to get started. As I move down the page, I can see each again of those 7 modules in its own kind of file folder system. So I can click on any self-assessment, any module, and see where I am. So I can see here, we're going to come back to it, but in child nutrition, I've already set some goals, and so they're listed down here below. In breastfeeding, I could start a self-assessment. I haven't done anything yet. And here in infant and child physical activity, it tells me to finish my self-assessment. I've already started one. So that's where we're going to start today. I'm going to show you a little bit about what the self-assessment looks like. Because I've already started the self-assessment, and so I'm going to click this button to finish it. It starts off by showing me each of those sections we talked about before and telling me what questions I have to finish. If I was starting the self-assessment for the first time, it would just take me straight into the questions. But here we go. So remember, we've been talking before about each of the subsections. So for each of the subsections, I have my own page of the self-assessment. So we start here with time provided. And the very first question is, how much time for indoor and outdoor physical activity is provided to preschool children each day? And here I've already answered this question. We have about 90 minutes of physical activity every day. I keep on moving through. There's a different question for how much time toddlers are provided. And I said that they get about 75 minutes every day. Next question is, how often does your program offer tummy time to non-crawling infants? And I think we probably do that, I would hope, 3 times a day. Now, as you heard, I said I hope. So I, as a director, ideally would take this self-assessment. I'll show you in a minute where you can print it out and really spend my time to collect the information, to talk to my infant teachers in this case, get feedback from them, to really answer it for my whole program. That's one thing to know about Go NAPSACC is it is a facility level intervention. So it is for a full program. It's not per classroom. It's for the whole child care program. And we want directors or family child care home people to kind of fill it out based upon what really is happening in their program, not based upon their superstar teacher, but really kind of what's the medium or so person doing, because then we can know honestly where we are, and then we can set goals to work for the future. As you can see, many of these words are underlined. Any of those, you can take your mouse and just hover over it and see a definition of that question, of that phrase. It might be something that you're familiar with, but you're not sure how Go NAPSACC defines it, or it might be something you're not familiar with. So here it's talking about tummy time. Tummy time is supervised time when an infant is awake and alert, lying on his or her belly, and then it goes on to tell you more about it. So know that those are there. That's really important. We know that providers sometimes aren't sure about all the questions, so we want them to know that there's a way here to help them through. Here's another one for adult-led physical activity, and it talks about what that means. So I continue to answer my questions. And then as I finish each section, I hit continue, and it takes me on to the next section. Every time I hit continue, it saves the work I've done. So we know that's important. We know that being in childcare is a very multitask, busy place to be. And so we want directors to know that every time they hit that continue, it saves the work. And then when they come back, again, it will ask me to finish my self-assessment, and they can do that from there. Continue to move through. There are Most questions have 4 answers, and just so you know, the last answer is always the best practice. But there are some questions that have multiple answers where you check all that apply and so forth. Continue to move through, continue to hit continue. Here we've got questions about daily practices. And now we've come to our education and professional development section. And remember, I said that Go NAPSACC defines education and professional development as the education of children, families, and staff. And they consider that to be both informal and formal education. So this is talking about how often do children participate in planned lessons, so formal lessons to think about gross motor skills, and also informally, how often do staff talk to children about the importance of physical activity. When it comes to professional development, Go NAPSACC is not expecting that to all be formal sit-down trainings. It could be sharing about a website to get physical activity lesson plans or ideas or creative games to play with children on a website. It could be sharing a handout. It could be having a conversation at a staff meeting. So there's lots of ways to help teachers develop their skills, and we want to count them all in Go NAPSACC. As you move through, the last section in every self-assessment is a question about written policy. In this case, right, does your program have a written policy on physical activity? If you answer no, then you're done. If you answer yes, then there's one of these drop-down menus that asks you about all of the topics in your policy. Once you've answered, you hit continue. And if you were completely done, here it shows me, look, I'm still not done. But if I was done, I'd hit this finish and view results button. So that's what the self-assessment process looks like. I can show you right here is where you can print the blank self-assessment. So in that case, we are looking at physical activity. I would click on it here. It opens in its own window. I can save it as a PDF or I can print it out. But this allows the director to print it out if they're a person who prefers to do a first draft on paper or a person who wants to get input from others. That's where they can print their self-assessment. It's important if they're going to print their self-assessment to print it from here within their account. So Go NAPSACC self-assessments are tailored for the program. That means things like if your program is a family childcare home or a center, the questions and the best practices might be slightly different. If your program doesn't have infants, there are some questions you won't get. So for example, in breastfeeding and infant feeding, if your program starts with age 2, you don't get questions about infant feeding because you're not feeding infants. You do, however, get questions about breastfeeding because we still want you to create an environment that supports breastfeeding, supports the families who might have younger infants who are breastfeeding, and support your staff who might be breastfeeding, as well as just helping children at a young age understand that breastfeeding is normal, positive, and part of being a baby in this world, right? So we certainly want you to be able to answer questions about breastfeeding. But there are other examples where the self-assessments that are tailored. So we want to make sure that you print the self-assessment from within the child care provider's account, because that way it's tailored specifically for their program. As you can see, there's a short video and how-to guide right here on the self-assessment page, as well as on all the other pages. So the provider wants to watch a video to get familiar with the self-assessment process first, or rather read a short how-to guide, they can download those here and get themselves familiar. So I showed you after you take that infant and child physical activity self-assessment, you'd hit that button that says, you know, I finished and I'm ready to see my results. We can't see those in physical activity because that self-assessment still isn't completed. So instead, I'm going to show you the results here in child nutrition. So we have finished, since we've finished that self-assessment. So to do that, you simply click on this button that says view results. And what I see is all those sections of the self-assessment. Here's one where I'm really strong. I'm really strong in beverages provided. Here's one where I have still more places to go to improve. When I click on any of those pictures, I'm given my results. First, I see all the best practices that my program has already met. So we're doing well here. Children are offered, right? We just talked about that they're, we want children to be offered fruit juice 2 times per week or less, because we want them to be getting their fruit as whole fruit, that sugary drinks are never offered, and so forth. And here's the best practice I haven't yet met yet. So I only have one in the beverages provided section I still need to work on, which is making drinking water always available. One of the things I like about Go NAPSACC is it shows you what your answer was on the self-assessment and what the best practice is. So it's never hidden from the provider. They know exactly what their goals are. If I want to see other results, I click here on the View Other Results button. I can pick a different section, maybe around feeding practices, and I can see again, here are the best practices I've already met, and here are the best practices I need to meet. I also have the option to simply print all of my results. So if I do that, I click there, and again, it opens in a new window. I can save it as a PDF, I can print it, and then I see all of my results for child nutrition at once. For each section, I see the best practices I've already met listed here under best practices your program has met. And then I see here the ones I haven't met yet. I see what the best practice is, what my response is, and what I'm working towards. Any questions about the self-assessment before we move on to step 2, which is action planning? So there are several ways I can get to action planning. One of them, as you can see right here on the bottom of the page next to my print my results, is I can say I want to start an action plan. And I come back to this same picture. I can pick 3 sections to work on action plans. Go NAPSACC doesn't want a provider to pick everything at once. We know that while they may be motivated, often that will become overwhelming and they may not actually meet those goals. We want them just to pick a few goals at a time, really put them into action, and then they can always come back and do more. So I'm going to pick feeding practices and foods provided as my 2 sections I'm going to look at. Hit continue. And now here I see all the best practices that I haven't met yet. Here are the best practices I have met, but I've already met those. So I want to start with places I haven't met my goals. And I'm going to pick, let's just pick one thing to work on for now. So let's work on vegetables are rarely or never cooked or flavored with meat, fat, margarine, or butter. So I select that goal. And now it shows up down here, right where I was. And it looks like on a different day, I picked this other goal. I'm going to hit continue. And now here I go. I can start my action plan. Go NAPSACC gives for every single self-assessment question, which becomes a best practice, gives a pre-populated start to the action plan. So you can see right here on top is that goal that we chose. That's the one thing I can't change because that's permanent, right? Well, that's the goal we're working on. But then here's a start to my action plan. It's specific to just this topic. So I'm going to share with my staff what we're working on. I'm going to go to the tips and material library that I'm going to show you all soon to look for new recipes. I'm going to think of new ways to season my vegetables. So lots of suggestions here on what I can do to make this goal become reality. But I also want the provider to make it personal to them. We all know we're more likely to meet a goal if we really think through what do we need to do differently. So maybe I need to actually start off by looking at our current menu. Maybe I'm not sure what our current menu includes. So I want to add a step, which is to ask my cook to give me a list of the recipes that use meat fat, right? So maybe that's where I'm going to start. So I'm going to say, okay, I want to add that goal. And now I don't really want it here at the bottom. I want it all the way at the top because that's where I'm going to get started. So I'm going to move that goal all the way to my top. So I can continue to move through and edit. And so I need to do that. So I'm going to talk to the cook tomorrow. We're going to talk tomorrow and touch base. So I can make this personal for me as a program. Another thing to keep in mind is if you're working with a provider for whom English isn't their first language, you can edit any of these goals and add them in another language, any of these steps to these goals. So you could add them in Spanish or whatever else that's helpful. If you do that, as I mentioned before, the one piece you can't edit is this goal here on top. So we suggest that you add that as a step in that other language, whether that be Spanish or any other language, and then move it at the top so that they can see what their goal is in the way that's most helpful for them. As they move through and finish their action plan, you obviously, when you're done, you want to save it. And then it looks like this, so that you then can come, and as I finished each step, I could check it off to let myself and others know what I've done. I can also print my plan the same way I've showed you other things to print, because we know the providers aren't necessarily going to be in Go NAPSACC every day. Perhaps they need to print out their action plan, put it on their bulletin board in their office, share it with their cook in this case, whatever makes it easiest for them. Know that Go NAPSACC provides a date for each action plan of how long we think it takes to finish that goal. Some are easier, some are harder. The dates change a little bit, but you can always also edit that date, and we encourage you to think about what else is happening around this time and how much time you honestly need to finish. Once the provider has truly implemented this action plan and made it reality in their program, they are going to come back to Go NAPSACC and right here, click on, I reached this goal. And that way it's marked in the account and in the evaluation of the work on the state level as having been a goal that's been met. If I click here on my action planning dashboard, I can see all of the different action plans I've worked on. As you can see right here, here's the one we just added today. And here's one I added earlier today. These two here, as you can see, have been completed. So that's where the provider marked that button that said, I reached this goal. Any other questions about action planning before we move on? Action planning for many providers is the most cumbersome part of Go NAPSACC, both in terms of the technology of using the website, to be honest, and also in terms of really thinking through what are the steps they need to take in order to make this new goal a reality. And so that's really where you as a consultant are so helpful to help them think about what do they need to put into place and what resources are available to them. As you can see here, the next thing on our dashboard is our tips and materials section. You can also see that next to every action plan, it also says view related tips and materials. So I'm going to go here to show you the tips and material library that's connected specifically to this goal around vegetables and how they're cooked. So when I click on that related tips and materials, it takes me into our tips and material library. And you can see we start off right away looking at things around vegetables, building a healthy plate, a section here on classroom activities, and then also around family engagement, all again related to the foods we eat. Everything in the Go NAPSACC tips and material library has been checked to make sure it meets Go NAPSACC best practices, that it's written in a way that we feel is accessible to childcare providers and to families, and they're all saved right here on the website. That's really important to us, that you're not clicking to a new website where you then can click on something else and eventually get to something that might not meet best practices. We really want to make sure that every piece of material that a provider is getting will help them on their journey to creating healthier habits. You can also see that many of these things say after them a Spanish version. If you click on that, you get the exact same resource, but of course available to you in Spanish. The materials in here are often handouts, pieces of larger toolkits. There's also videos and so forth that might be helpful to share. So here I took you to the tips and materials that are specific to our goal around vegetables. But if I click here on the left, I will see the full library. So here I can click on any module and get the subsections that we've talked about, foods provided, beverages provided, and so forth. And I can see different types of materials that are available in each section. Additionally, I can search here. So if I wanted things specifically around vegetables, I believe I can search for that. And I will end up with things that are might help me in meeting that goal. So there's a search section there. For each section, there is also a comprehensive nutrition section. So larger resources that talk about nutrition as a whole. So that's available. Also within that comprehensive section is a copy of the full self-assessment for childcare centers and family childcare homes. But remember, as I mentioned before, the copy here is not tailored for that childcare program, but it does give you an idea of what the full self-assessment looks like. The other thing that's available in each comprehensive section is this resource called No and Low Cost Best Practices in Child Nutrition. And that is a selection of the best practices that we feel are easiest for people to first implement, especially if they're working on a reduced budget, which we know all childcare is working on a very careful budget. So that can be for a childcare provider who maybe is looking at their self-assessment results and is overwhelmed with where to start. This is a document that you might feel is helpful to share with them and think about, okay, which are the ones that are easiest for me to start with that will cost the least and give me a chance to see the momentum get going. The other section I want to show you in each of the tips and materials is that we have a separate section of resources in Spanish. Those are all the same resources that I showed you before. The difference is here, the titles are in Spanish. So this is a place where a provider for whom Spanish is their more comfortable language, they can come here and simply look at the titles and make choices from here. But they totally match everything that you see in the other sections where it tells you that there's a Spanish version available. So here we can see resources for teachers and staff, classroom activities, and then family engagement resources. Any questions about tips and materials or anything else I've shown you so far? Thanks, Tamika. I'm glad you're finding it helpful. Certainly want everyone to see all that's here and to get comfortable as we move forward. All right, as you can see on our navigation bar, the next section is on trainings. And again, you see those same file folders I mentioned before. And again, for each of the subsections of the self-assessment, there is approximately half an hour training available. These are online, on demand, obviously. They provide the provider who watches them a 30-minute or a 0.5 contact hour training certificate. You would need to check with your state lead to make sure that they've been approved for training in your state. And Emmy hopefully will put in the chat the link to find out who your state lead, if that's not a person you're familiar with. At this point, most Go NAPSACC states are giving credit for these trainings. For each of those trainings, there's also a handout, which I can show you an example of a handout here to help those people who are kinesthetic learners to be able to take notes and help them through the training. The first page has various questions from the training And then the second page is a list of all the best practices and some ideas they have for themselves on how to move forward and apply this content. There is on the trainings page a how-to guide to help you get started, but I'll show you a little bit because the first time it could be a little bit cumbersome. So the first thing you do is you start a new session. And the reason why you give the session name is because remember, this is an account for the whole child care program. So I might be taking the training myself today, so I'm going to just name it my name, right? But another day or a different session might be, I don't know, all the preschool teachers are going to take it together. So we might name it that way. Or if you were watching a training on breastfeeding, it might be the infant classroom, and our infant classroom is called the butterfly room. So whatever it is that's going to let you know who took this training so that you can come back, which you'll see in a moment. And again, as I mentioned, it can be taken individually or in a group, and I will show you how that works in a second. So I'm going to confirm that this is when I'm taking the training. That gives me a timestamp. I hit submit. The next thing I do now is there I am, butterfly room, and we're going to start playing our video. It opens right into the account. Right now I have the sound turned off, but I just want to give you an idea of what it looks like. At various times in the training, there are places where there are questions that get asked. And so sometimes the questions are, you know, true and false or things like that. Sometimes the questions are simply something for you to think about. In this case, how could this meal be improved? Right? We've got this meal of chicken nuggets and French fries and peas. We've learned a little bit. We're going to think about how it can be improved. Then when I'm ready to continue, I say I'm ready to continue, and I'm able to keep on moving through the training. So those questions all have to be answered to continue moving through the training. All of the trainings start with some sort of scenario that applies to the topic to get people thinking, information about the best practices for that section, information about the whole child that we talked about and how it's connected to the child's larger development, and then continues to move through the topic. At the end of the training, there is an opportunity to write down a quiz code that I should have written down before this training, but I admit I forgot. Hopefully it's going to come up in just a second so I can show you the next piece. And so I need to write down this quiz code so that once I've completed the training, I can move on back to my start button and I can take my knowledge quiz. So I'm going to write down my quiz code. And I just realized I did it as a 1 instead of an I, sorry. Uh-oh. Emmy, any idea what I'm doing wrong?
Oh, someone corrected you in the chat. It was XDZ1W, not 7.
Oh, there you go. That's a problem. I can't read my own handwriting. Thank you, whoever that was.
One, not I.
Yep. This is what I get for not doing it in advance. All right. So Emmy, while you're on, you're going to help me answer these questions.
Great.
All right. Based on the best practices, what kind of fruit can be offered every time fruit is served? It is all of the above, as long as we're not using syrup in our canned fruits.
Correct.
Which options would meet the best practices for vegetables? We want dark colored vegetables. Based on the best practices, how often should programs offer sweet or salty snacks outside of meal times? We hope it's once a week or never. So for each training, there are 3 short knowledge quiz questions. If I was doing this on my own, I would obviously answer them on my own. If I was watching this training with a group of people, we would all answer them as a group. I would then move on from there. I've passed my knowledge quiz and I move on to the evaluation section. So I move to the evaluation. There's lots of information here, but I'm going to tell you a few things just to get you started. We need the name of every person if they want to get a training certificate. So this can be completed right now as I've done the training, or if I had a large group of teachers, we were all watching it together, I could come back to this later and enter this information at once later. But I need the phone number of the child care program. I need the people who watched it. If you don't put an email address in, then it will move to just use the program's email address. Registry ID, that depends on your state. Here in North Carolina, there is no registry. That's a computer-based registry with an ID. Lots of states have them. The only way we're going to get that information is if it's entered here. And we are working to have our database talk more directly to many states' registries. And so if people want credit, they're going to want their registry ID here. But we can continue to move through. We enter all the people. We're going to do it today as if I took it myself. You can add more participants if there are more people who took it. We're going to answer the questions about the training. I'm going to apply what I learned. I thought it was a good training. I hit submit. I confirm that the information I entered is correct, again, because we want to make sure people get their credits. That's really important to providers. I say yes. And now, if I move to the bottom of the page, I can get my training certificate. So right there is the certificate I took today. So for some providers, they need to print these certificates, provide them to their director or so forth. They need to know kind of what works in their state. And that's probably helpful information for you to know as well, since getting training hours are so important to childcare providers. These trainings, as I mentioned, were created to be watched individually or in a group. You also, as consultants, can share these trainings with a group of providers, whether that's live in their program, projecting it up on a wall, or if that's by Zoom, you could certainly provide these trainings and share your screen. And there are, as we mentioned, places throughout where you can pause, have discussion, and help them think through what's next. If you're going to use it that way as a consultant, sharing the trainings with providers from multiple childcare programs, make sure you talk to your state lead about how that's working in your state. Any questions about the trainings page before I move on? And Patricia, thanks for paying attention to the code. My 7s have lines through them. It wasn't a very clear Z. All right. The next page in the account is your My Account page, and that is simply all the questions, all the information that the provider provided when they first registered for their account. And I'll show you about how you register in a little bit, but obviously the name of their program, their contact information, and then questions about their childcare program. Remember, I mentioned early on that Go NAPSACC is tailored for the childcare provider. So the information is garnered from when they first register. So we really want to make sure that they're careful when they register so that they get the appropriate questions in their self-assessment. So questions about if they're full or half day, what age of the children they serve, how many children in their program, some questions about the foods they provide, what meals they provide, who prepares those foods, are they a member of CACFP? How many children in their program are on subsidy? And can they make changes to their outdoor play area, which influences their outdoor play and learning self-assessment? If they realize they made a mistake, as long as they don't have any open self-assessments, they can come back in and change their answers. If they have an open self-assessment, they would have to finish that self-assessment first in order to change their answers and then move on to other self-assessments. Lastly, there is a help page in Go NAPSACC. There is a how-to guide that goes through the whole account for a provider, which they can download. We also have a technical service support desk that is answered, business hours, Monday to Friday, East Coast time, as well as an email address that's responded to fairly quickly with any questions. However, we do hope that providers will first go to you, their personal expert, the person they know best, and then you can certainly move questions on to us as you have them. Any other questions about what the provider account looks like before I go back to the end of our presentation?
Aviva, we have a question from Catherine in the chat about trainings.
Right, so it can be either way, Catherine. A person can watch it themselves individually in their account, and that's fine, and they would go through that process and get their training certificate. Or in some cases, consultants are helping programs move through the process, but really they were intended to be for a provider to use them on their own or with other staff members in their childcare program. That's why they're found within the provider account. Thanks for the question, Catherine. Move us to where we are in our presentation before I move on. For those of you who are looking at the printed PDF that I sent you, there are slides that explain all the things I showed you live in the website. So if you, as you do your assignment and you're looking on the website, those might help you kind of with reference points to how you move through. Any other questions? All right, let's talk about some next steps in our training. So you have completed step 1, which you've attended part 1 of the consultant tools training. Glad to have you here today. Next, you're gonna learn about your assignment so you can practice using the provider tools, and you can complete a survey that goes with that. And I will show you all the details for that in a minute. That needs to be completed before we come back together in 2 weeks from now. So looking at the assignment, and again, before today is out, I'm going to send you an email about the assignment with this assignment attached. So please, you don't have to write anything down now. This is just to show you what it looks like. So the assignment gives you a chance to practice hands-on the provider tools in the demo website. So you're not going to go to the regular Go NAPSACC website. You're going to go to this special demo website. You'll be able to click on it right from this assignment. From there, you're going to be given an option of 3 scenarios that you can try out. If you have a specific interest in one of these areas, you're welcome to pick that one. But it just gives you an idea, kind of to put yourself in the mindset of what a provider might be thinking as they are moving through Go NAPSACC. The very last page of the assignment has the registration code you're going to need. So I'm going to say that again, just work your way through the whole assignment. It gives you every step you need, but you do need your state's personal registrations code to get started. So when you do the assignment, you are going to have a scenario. You're going to create a pretend account. You can name your account anything you want. It can be your childcare program of your dreams. Name your childcare program, register them for an account. We encourage you to register them as if they are a full day childcare center that cooks meals in their own kitchen. That gives you the greatest access to all the pieces of Go NAPSACC, unless you're a consultant who works specifically with family childcare homes or something, in which case it makes more sense to create an account for them. We do encourage you to create an account for a center. As you read the scenario, you're going to answer the self-assessment questions in that module. You're then going to create at least one action plan and find at least one related tips and material resource to support the work of that provider. You're welcome to watch trainings or do anything else or look at other self-assessments once you're in the account, but that is the main thing you're going to need to do to get yourself started. As you create your account on that demo website, you're going to click on that green button that you see here on the right that says join today. And remember, you are pretending you are a child care provider. So for the demo website, you are going to create a demo and owner's account. So please make sure that's what you do. Create a director's and owner's account, pretending that you are the provider. From there, you'll enter your email address and that becomes your username for your account. You're going to create a password. I will tell you one thing that is different between the demo account and the live demo website and the live website. And that's that on the demo website, the forgot password function is turned off. That means you must remember the username and the password that you chose. So please, there's a space on your assignment to write that down or wherever else you save your passwords. We want you to be able to come back to this demo account so that you can practice and see things and help support childcare providers as they move through. So you are going to want to remember how to get in. From there, you're going to use the registration code that I showed you on that handout. You're going to review and accept the privacy policy so that you can continue to move through Go NAPSACC. And then you're going to answer all the remaining questions. As I mentioned, we want you to fill it out as if you are a full day childcare program. And then, as I said before, from there, you're going to take a self-assessment, set at least one goal, create at least one action plan, and find a related resource from the tips and material library. We really find this assignment helps people get comfortable with Go NAPSACC, makes it all real, better understand what's happening for the provider. So once you've done that, you will have finished your assignment. And then you're going to come back again here 2 weeks from today to attend part 2 of the consultant tools training, where I mentioned you're going to get to see what your account's going to look like. And we're going to talk a lot more about how you can support providers in doing this work. After that training, there's a second survey you complete. And that makes you certified as a Go NAPSACC consultant. Once you're certified, we email you a certificate. And at the same time, we email your state lead to let them know that they can invite you to create your account. Any questions about the assignment? And I want to make sure, I'm not sure I said this out loud, but when you do, after you do the assignment, you create that pretend account and do the self-assessment and the action planning. There's also going to be a link for you to complete a survey with a few questions and lets us know that you've completed the assignment. So make sure you click on that survey link as well. Any questions from anyone? We have a few more minutes today, but we have covered all of our content. But I just wanted to make sure if people have any more questions that they get a chance to answer or ask them. Otherwise, I would thank you for being here today. You will get from me an email if you were registered, which you should have been if you were here, an email with the recording from today, the handout, as well as the assignment. So I really thank you for your time today. I'm going to stay on a little bit longer. If you have questions, feel free to unmute yourself, and I will be here for a little bit more today. Thanks all.